When we evaluate a company, we're typically focused first on whether or not that business fits within a theme that we're interested in. We then spend as much time as we possibly can on two things. One is spending time with the people, spending time with the leadership, not just the entrepreneur, but the people around the entrepreneur, the people that are part of whatever that founding or early team is, as well as the product and really understanding how people are relating to the product that they're building. And we're really paying a lot of attention to the linkages. So it's not the raw intellectual horsepower necessarily of the leader or the entrepreneur, but instead the way that that person relates to, interacts with, and is focused on both the people and the product for the business they're trying to create. I think some of it is their passion and focus on the thing they're trying to do, and making sure that that passion and focus is directed at the business and the business opportunity rather than just the excitement about having a business. I think some of it is also, especially for people who are going to be the CEOs or want to lead the business, sort of their view of their role in the business as it expands, and recognizing that a leader of a 3-person startup is very different than a leader of a 3,000-person company. One of the things we're looking for when we make the investment is for them to choose us as much as we're choosing them. So we really want the entrepreneurs to have a chance to understand how we're going to work and how we're going to interact with them on an ongoing basis. So it's very qualitative and very mushy. There's not a checklist that you go down. There's not a series of sort of interviews that you do. But instead it's more just sort of a gut feel. And, we have each of our partners. I have 3 other partners. Each of us interact with the companies and the entrepreneurs, and we have our own independent assessment. And we have different, we all have different personalities. We have different viewpoints. So, the intersection of that feedback is actually quite important to us. We all have to be affirmative and positive about the investment. So we have a process where after each meeting somebody has, whether it's in a group or by themselves, if their sort of qualitative emotional response to the meeting is less than the previous sentiment, we pass immediately. So we try really hard not to get in a position where one of the partners is trying to advocate to everybody else, here's why we should do this investment. We can only do 8 to 10 new investments a year. We probably have through, all the deal flow that we see, and we see thousands of potential things a year. We probably have 100 companies that, we could invest in that would pass sort of that filter where we're all enthusiastic about it. So we're really choosing, the 10 a year that we do from the 100 that are all good enough. And as a result, if anybody has sort of a neutral to declining feeling about a company, we just stop. When I was running my first company, I had to really learn how to be a strong supporter of all the people that worked for us, while at the same time being able to be clear and critical about the things that I thought needed to be improved. We had a very friendly environment. Everybody in the company liked each other. We all worked closely together. The company grew at a pretty steady pace, and there wasn't a lot of turnover along the way. So there were and we were all pretty young, so there were a lot of relationships that got built that transcended just the work dynamic. And I had to learn how to deal with that myself. In other words, what was my emotional response to somebody that was clearly a good friend when they were not performing well or letting me down? And vice versa. I had to be accessible, so when I was letting somebody else down or wasn't following through, they were in a position, even though maybe I was the CEO, I was the boss, they could give me that kind of feedback. So really understanding how to do that in a way that was constructive and positive, yet direct and pretty blunt, was something that I spent, when I reflect on it, something I spent a lot of time learning, and I think carry through to this day. I had several mentors that had huge impact on me very early on. 2 of the ones that are easy mentors for most people to have were my dad, who was actually a partner and advisor in my first business. I had one other partner. The 2 of us ran the business, and then my father provided advice for us. He had a brother, a guy named Charlie Feld, who's a very successful businessman who spent a lot of time when I was in my teenage years and early 20s taking me to meetings, helping me understand how large corporations adopted technology and worked with them. It was very accessible. It was very inviting to me to participate in that kind of activity. My dad had a patient of his who was a very successful executive in the mini computer industry, sort of the 60s and 70s, who, when I was a teenager, took me under his wing He had started a company with his son that was a PC-based technology company at the very beginning of the PC industry, and I learned an enormous amount from him very early on. A couple of our early customers at my first company, Feld Technologies, a guy named Stuart Forbes, who was one of our very earliest clients, in addition to being a great client, was very helpful in terms of just being there for us all the time as we tried to sort out our business and understand how to grow. And then the two guys that bought my first business, Len Fassler and Jerry Pock, who were the co-chairman at the time of a company called Ameridata, helped me get to the next level in terms of what I was doing, up to the point that they bought our first business. I'd never done any transactions. I'd only built the business from scratch. I'd never raised money. I'd never invested in anything. And with them, I really started to understand how deals were done and acquisitions and investments, and they were hugely impactful. In each city that Techstars operates, so I'll just focus on Boulder, but there's programs now in New York, Boston, and Seattle. In each city, there's around 50 mentors. In New York, I think there are 75 mentors. Most of those mentors, but not all, are entrepreneurs. Some of the mentors are investors, venture capitalists or angel investors, who commit to actively engage as mentors versus just investors. Those mentors mentor 10 or so companies. And we don't try to have all the mentors meet continually with all the companies. What we do for the first couple of weeks is there's a lot of, the mentors sort of meet all the entrepreneurs and all the companies and vice versa. There's a lot of sort of mentor dating, as it were. But where the mentors are giving real interaction sort of up front, we encourage the companies by about week 3 to pick 2, 3, 4, 5 lead mentors, and really invite those lead mentors to spend real time with them over the balance of the program. And most of the mentors, we then encourage them to pick one company. So, really go deep with the company. Engage with the other companies, help where you can, but really sort of match up with one specific company. And then we encourage them to have a regular interaction. Some of them have a weekly interaction. When I mentor one company per city, per session, I do a 30-minute Skype call each week with each company. And so there's a repeating call in the calendar, 30 minutes, and I do what I call a top-of-mind drill. I don't have an agenda. I don't want an update. I go, what's top of mind? Let's just go through whatever issues you're struggling with right now. Let me try to respond to them and help you with them. Some mentors spend a day a week with the company. So there's no structured rules, but there's sort of a lot of encouragement around the best way to interact. And so what we tend to do is we tend to give people very specific things to interact with companies on to try to get them engaged, and see if they actually engage, because there's a mindset for mentors which is so important, which is that they're doing this with no expectation that they're going to get something. They're just mentoring, they're helping. And I would say people that end up becoming mentors long-term recognize the value and dynamic of that. And then the mentors, we also do a lot of organized events to get the mentors connected with each other, because many of the mentors, even though they're entrepreneurs in the same city, don't have a lot of interaction. So one of the benefits is the mentors get to spend time with each other in a broad sense, but also working with teams, because if a team has 5 mentors, those 5 mentors end up being the sort of quasi-board of directors, board of advisors for the companies as they go through the program. David Cohen and I recently wrote a book called Do More Faster, Techstars Lessons to Accelerate Your Startup. And it's actually a series of 2 to 5 page vignettes written by us. David and I wrote some of them, but many of them were written by mentors and entrepreneurs that went through the Techstars program. And the reason we wrote the book is that there's a lot of books that fall into one of 2 categories. Either an ego type book, which is written by an entrepreneur who says, look at how successful I am. You too can be successful one day if you just do the following things. And then at the other end of the spectrum is the consultant book, which is a consultant saying, here are the 12 things to do to be a successful entrepreneur. But those consultants have rarely actually been successful entrepreneurs themselves. So we wanted to try to write a first-person account from first-time entrepreneurs and their mentors that talked about the essence of being successful as entrepreneurs. So that's, of that sort of landscape of books, we've worked hard at Do More Faster and feel like it's a really quality book in that regard. Of course, it's for other people to judge, not for us. One of the books I recommend that first-time entrepreneurs read, which is a little offbeat, is Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It's a classic philosophy book from the 1970s. And the thing that's so powerful about Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is the book, while it's a sort of philosophical treatise, is really oriented around this notion of quality. and obsession with quality. So the ideas that sort of flow through this exploration of this notion of quality, of building something that has meaning and has lasting importance that is in this book is actually quite applicable to an entrepreneurial mindset. The other thing I think is most useful for entrepreneurs is to read lots of early history of other entrepreneurial successes. You have to read those books with a critical eye and recognize the writer and the author and the agenda of the book. Some of the books are more sort of puff promotion pieces around the entrepreneurs, but a lot of them are actually quite balanced and quite critical. And they give you a sense of the decisions that led to very significant successes. I prefer history than biography in this context, because I find that people, when they write their own version of the story, no matter how balanced they try to make it, it's always from a frame of reference that tips to them. And in some cases, it's a very obvious frame of reference in terms of somebody's own agenda about how they feel as a human being. Whereas the history, while maybe not as spicy, tends to be much more useful in terms of understanding the arc and the evolution of these businesses.